disabled freak!
I wish I was there to help her. I can only imagine how helpless she felt when it all happened. And most of all, I'm disappointed in every single one of those neighbors who stood and watched without lifting a finger. The same people who smiled and waved every morning suddenly forgot what it meant to be human. This is how it all started. Welcome to Prodigy Tales. Make sure you like and subscribe for your top-notch HOA drama. I'm a soldier, and 3 months ago I was deployed overseas for a mission that was supposed to last only a few weeks. I left behind my wife, Maggie, a brilliant lawyer, but one who suffered from severe arthritis. Walking without her crutches wasn't just painful, it was impossible. I didn't want to leave her alone, but she convinced me she'd be fine. Her younger sister, April, moved in to help her around the house and make sure she took her meds on time. Between April's energy and Maggie's stubbornness, I figured everything was under control. Before I left, the neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. Our HOA, led by none other than Karen Wilmore, acted more like a small dictatorship than a community. You couldn't even hang a flower basket without approval. But I kept my head down. I didn't have the time or patience for HOA politics. Maggie, though? She was observant. She always said something smelled off about Karen's leadership, and knowing my wife, once she got suspicious, she didn't let go. Everything seemed normal the first few weeks. Maggie would send me pictures of her in the garden, sitting with her coffee, while April painted the porch. But I should have known peace doesn't last long around power-hungry people like Karen. She thrived on control, and the moment someone dared to challenge her authority, she'd strike back, hard. It wasn't until that late-night call from Maggie that I realized things had taken a dark turn, a very dark one. Before we dive in deeply, let us know in the comments what country or which city you're watching this story from. We'd love to know how far this story travels. Maggie called me one night, her voice shaky but sharp with anger. She told me the HOA fees had suddenly jumped by 75% for the last 2 months, and no one in the neighborhood dared to question it. Apparently, Karen claimed the money was for community development, but the only development anyone noticed was the shiny new luxury SUV parked in Karen's driveway and her freshly renovated kitchen she bragged about on Facebook. Maggie wasn't the kind of woman to ignore corruption. Even though she was physically limited, mentally she was sharper than anyone I knew. She had already started digging through HOA documents, payment records, and meeting transcripts. She told me she'd found multiple inconsistencies, funds missing, fake receipts, signatures that didn't match. My wife might have been on crutches, but she was about to cripple Karen's entire operation. I could hear the determination in her voice that night. She said she planned to expose Karen during the next HOA meeting. She even laughed and said, "Let's see if she still struts around in her heels when everyone learns where the money really went." I couldn't help but smile. That was my Maggie, fierce, smart, and completely fearless. But then her tone changed. She told me about the phone call she had with Karen earlier that day. When Maggie politely asked about the development projects, Karen snapped, saying, "It's none of your business, cripple." Maggie said she froze, not because of the insult, but because she realized just how venomous Karen really was. The so-called community leader was nothing more than a bully with a badge of authority. I told her to stay calm and not confront Karen alone, but Maggie insisted she'd handle it. "I'm a lawyer, honey. I deal with people like her every day." Those were her exact words. Still, something in my gut twisted. I didn't like the sound of it. I didn't like the idea of her facing that woman in person. And most of all, I didn't like the silence that followed our call that night. The HOA meeting day came, and Maggie told her sister April not to bother tagging along. "It's just a quick meeting," she said. "I'll be back before dinner." If only she knew what was waiting for her there. The moment she rolled into that clubhouse with her crutches tapping against the polished tiles, the room went stiff. Karen sat at the head of the table like some wannabe queen, flipping through papers that probably had more lies than words. The meeting started out with the usual nonsense. Karen bragging about her achievements, like repainting a sign or planting flowers she never actually planted. My wife waited patiently until Karen paused and asked if anyone had comments. That was all the invitation she needed. Maggie stood up, balancing with her crutches, and calmly said, "Yes, I do." She started questioning where the development funds went, demanding an explanation for the missing money. Every word she said made the room tighten with tension. Karen tried to laugh it off, but Maggie wasn't letting go. You said this money was for the neighborhood, not your personal upgrades. Where's the accountability? She pressed. Karen's smirk faded fast. She slammed her papers down and snapped, You don't get to question me. You don't even contribute properly here. Maggie fired back instantly. We all pay dues, Karen. You're not a ruler. You're an embezzler. That's when Karen lost it. Why am I even being interrogated by a crutches-wielding freak? She shouted, grabbing one of Maggie's crutches right out of her hand. The room gasped, but nobody moved. Not one person helped. Karen yanked the other crutch away and shoved Maggie to the floor like she was trash. My wife cried out in pain, hitting the cold tile hard, trying to pull herself up while everyone just stood frozen. Some neighbors whispered, others looked away, too cowardly to act. Karen stood over her, eyes full of venom, and said, Next time, know your place. And my wife, with tears in her eyes, whispered, I hope you know yours when this is over. April had a bad feeling that day. She said something in her gut just told her Maggie should have been home by now. When she didn't pick up her calls, April rushed straight to the community hall. The moment she walked in, she froze. Maggie was on the floor, crying in pain, and the room was dead silent. Nobody helped. Not one of those so-called neighbors lifted a finger. April screamed for help, ran to her sister, and held her tight while glaring at every coward standing around like statues. She called the ambulance immediately, her voice shaking with rage. Paramedics arrived and carried Maggie out on a stretcher while Karen just stood there pretending like nothing happened. But she wasn't ready for what was coming next, because I was already on the first flight out of California by sunrise, and I didn't come back quietly. When I walked into that neighborhood, people scattered. Karen tried to play victim, but I made sure she felt every ounce of justice the law could deliver. I gathered every report, every recording, every HOA document Maggie had collected, and slammed Karen with charges that stacked higher than her fake ego. Assault on a disabled person, unlawful seizure of medical equipment, harassment, abuse of authority, fraud and misappropriation of HOA funds. She didn't even make bail. The court tore her apart piece by piece. My wife testified, April backed her up, and even the spineless neighbors, when threatened with perjury, finally found their voices. The jury took one look at the footage April had recorded from the HOA's security feed, and it was game over. Karen's face when the verdict was read? Pure shock. 12 years in state prison, $80,000 in restitution, and her HOA presidency stripped away forever. We moved out a month later. I didn't even want to breathe the same air as those cowards again. Maggie's recovery was slow but steady, and by the time she ditched her crutches for good, she walked out of that hospital taller than I'd ever seen her. The end. Please like and subscribe for more HOA showdowns like this. Do you think she got what she deserves? Comment below.